Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the Back of the Bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today I've got a phenomenal guest on here with me. He works in CGI. Most of the films that you've seen, or some of the films you've seen, he will have worked on. So I'm really excited about this. I'm going to welcome in on straight away, Chris Clough. Yeah!
Hello? Should I be looking at you or the camera?
Look at that camera and go,
hello.
Hey up, howdy.
Hey up, howdy.
Mate, don't worry, because I put a wicked Foley in. At this point, when I go mental, you have a big crowd cheer, and it looks like there's 20 odd people in the back. I could get you to CGI it in.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't do characters stuff.
You're a busy man, aren't you?
I am.
I can't be asking that. but dude, CGI, it baffles me. How long have you been doing it for, professionally?
Professionally, about 10 years now, I've worked in film computer graphics. I started out as what's called a data operator, which is like basically just looking after computer data on a network for a visual effects company.
Okay.
I was doing that for a couple of years. Not very interesting. It's just literally moving files around the network. But then that was my...
Segue.
My foot in the door, as it were, and then when the company needed a 3D modeler, I was able to move up within the company and start working as an artist.
With a guest like you, who really fascinates me, I do feel I want to go back in time a little bit to young Chris, because what was going on in his head? Did you know from an early age that film was going to be the avenue and where you were going?
Yeah, I did. I think from probably watching Star Wars for the first time was when that and Indiana Jones, I think, were the films that I grew up on, and I was just like blown away by them. A nice bit of escapism from everyday life.
Do you go back and watch them now times, the old ones?
Not so much now. I don't really have that much time.
Yeah.
But I'm quite busy, as you said.
Because when you do, some of the times in nostalgia in your head, you can watch a film and think, oh, it was so good. It was such an incredible experience. Then you go back and look at it and it's beautiful nostalgia, but it's really poorly done in some elements. You know what I mean? If you look at James Bond again, which I was really into, the fighting scenes and everything are kind of laughable now. But I remember in my head, I'd glorified them to this special thing. But yeah, going back in time with film.
Yeah, I just loved watching films as a child, and that's what made me want to pursue a career in it.
So did you get a camera quite early on?
I did, yeah. It's almost as if you need to ask me that.
What was it,
I used to have a little old mini DV camera, like one that takes the little video cassettes. While I was in school, I used to run around the old quarry near my house with some of my friends dressed up in soldiers' uniforms, and I tried to make this a little short film, low budget film. It was terrible.
Wow.
But I had fun doing it, and it was enough to convince me that it was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Were you the director and everything of that film?
I was the director. I made the costumes. I made the like pretend laser guns that everyone was running around with. They were like molded from like plaster of Paris.
And you made those?
Yeah, I made those. I carved one of them in like plaster, made a rubber mold from it, and then it was a sci-fi film, so I didn't want to just like use a prop gun from. And
then you've created this film. You started doing CGI early on in these days, or?
Yeah, I guess I was trying to emulate what I was seeing in films like Star Wars.
Of course.
So there was a spaceship in one of the scenes which looked terrible, but that was my first little foray into computer graphics, and then I added like laser blasts on top of the footage. It was so bad.
Did you have Foley as well? Did you have a bit of pew pew pew?
I think I just had one single sound effect, so it was the exact same sound every time someone fired a gun. Yeah, it was terrible.
Do you still have that film in anywhere to watch?
It still exists on a mini DV cassette. Because we're talking like 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
Computer hard drives were too expensive that I couldn't store the film on a hard drive, so I had to copy it back onto a mini DV tape to store, to save it, to make space for more stuff on my hard drive, to like new projects and things.
But you were quite technical minded as well, so computers was always a big part of your life, film was a part of your life, you knew it was technology that you were fascinated by.
A kind of fusion between technology and also art, using technology to create visual images,
bring art to life. And the teachers at the time, you'd spent all these days building these models, really fascinated by it, really passionate. Did they exhilarate that? Did they help you on that path of...
Yeah, I had a really good art teacher, actually.
Cool.
She was... I built quite a lot of the props and things in art classes when I should have been doing coursework.
That's incredible, though.
They were quite supportive. My headmaster had a good piece of advice. He said, you can achieve anything you want to, but whatever you do, don't go to Bournemouth University to study media.
Really?
So what did I do? I applied for a course. It was computer animation at Bournemouth Uni in the media school there.
Right, okay.
I researched it, and it found it was one of the best courses of its kind in the country.
Why did he give that advice then? What had he been there and done that?
Media studies in general, I think, has a bit of a bad reputation. And Bournemouth University, on the whole, has a bit of a bad reputation. It was about ranked 100th out of 105 or something in the league tables at the time. But this one course that I did, computer animation there, was like world leading at the time. It was as competitive to get onto the course as Oxford and Cambridge.
Was it life-changing for you at uni there, everything you'd taken on?
I wouldn't say life-changing at that stage. It was... I loved the freedom of living life at university away from home for the first time. That was great. The work that we were doing, there was a lot of coursework and a lot of lectures as well. Like most of the other students at the uni were doing like 8 or 10 hours of lectures a week.
Yeah.
We had, I think, 35 hours of lectures plus about the same in coursework that we were expected to do.
Wow.
On top of that.
Because I feel for me now, this old boy you see in front of you, if I went to uni, I'd be pretty good because I've got the thirst for learning. I've got a passion, I know what I like, and if I went to uni, I'd be able to exhilarate myself through that. And it feels you got that quite young, because you had this want to achieve in this field. So going to uni would have suited you quite well. I see a lot of people go to uni because it's sort of you're supposed to, and then they're not actually that bothered. They don't put in that time, don't put in that effort that it takes. But you seem like the mindset I've got now had it back then because you just did it for yourself. And I think that's one of the key things to achieving and being successful is you've got to have the thirst, you've got to have the want to achieve, and you already had it. And was that just purely ingrained in you?
Yeah, I had a very sort of clear path that I wanted to take my career down. I mean, originally as a child, I guess I wanted to be a film director, but I decided to go down the visual effects route just because I figured my chances of getting to work on big Hollywood movies would be about 500 times better, because there are typically 500, maybe even 1,000 VFX artists working on big films, but only ever one director. So I decided I wanted to aim for the big time, so I went down the more likely route to succeed.
So you do like all elements of film, but that was the one you thought, I can actually go for this and I think I can come through.
Yeah.
On top of. I like that. Is that the directing sort of market? Is that bustling? Is everyone sort of going in wanting to be a director?
Yeah. I don't really know actually, to be honest, but it seems like when you just look at the arithmetics of it, like how many blockbuster films are there a year? Maybe 20?
Wow, yeah.
That's 20 directors. I mean, obviously there's all sorts of other smaller films below that. But like, if there's only 20 people in the world making the sort of films that I wanted to work
hitting
on,
the blockbuster scene,
I kind of figured I wouldn't succeed in becoming one of those 20.
Yeah, I get
But there
ya.
would be, I don't know, probably 5,000 visual artists, visual effects artists contributing to those
believe
20 films.
how big the team is. And again, describing to a dummy like me the process and the steps that it was, because we were discussing it before the podcast. You know, there's a film idea, a director creates it, and then I didn't realise it gets made, because in my head I thought during the filming you'd keep adding in the CGI and keep adding the scenes together and build it up through that, but that's not the case. It gets made and then it gets into your hands.
Yeah, it's generally most of the visual effects work is done afterwards. It's always great when they actually plan out before they start shooting what they want to do later. Sometimes they don't have any clue what they're going to add in terms of visual effects, but usually there's a plan. So we'll have the shots will get sent through to a visual effects company. There'll be a brief, so they'll say we want a cityscape adding in the background and it should look like this, or they want an explosion over here, or a spaceship flying in from here.
Wow.
So the process is basically, it starts with 3D modeling, which is my specific role in the industry. So I build 3D models on a computer of anything that's too big, too dangerous, or too expensive to build for real.
It's a great way of putting it.
I then pass those models on to a texture artist, so their job is basically just colouring in.
My Ella could be doing that.
Yeah, yeah, just like a colouring in book. That's
She's
all the
only 8
texture
months.
artists do. And then it goes through to a stage called look development. That's basically defining the material properties of the surface, so like how shiny or reflective it is. And then it's ready to be put into the shots. So then it will go to an animator, will animate it. Depending on what it is, obviously buildings wouldn't need animating, so they can just be placed in
of course,
the right position in 3D space. But if it's a character or a vehicle, then an animator will basically make it move through the scene. A lighting artist will set up some virtual lights inside the computer to try and replicate the lighting that was on set. To try and make it blend in as well as possible. And then the final stage is compositing, which is basically taking 2D rendered images from the lighting artist, and then the compositor will blend those with the original footage.
Wow.
And then they'll add in things like dust or smoke or atmosphere to try and just blend it all together and make it look like
realism.
Like it was all there in the camera to begin with.
Dude, I'm so happy that I've got you on the bus, and I'm so happy I've learnt this new element of what it takes. I mean, could you do any of those jobs to a degree?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, I generally the 3D side, which is most of those steps, and then the 2D side are very separate, so there's not a lot of crossover between artists. I'm definitely more on the 3D side, so I can do the colouring in, I can do I'm starting to try and expand my skill set into lighting and look dev as well.
Wow. But the animation side, sort of keep away from a little bit.
I guess I don't have much of a sense of timing. I can't make things move in a realistic way. I did a little bit at university because it was obviously a very, very like wide-ranging course, so we did a little bit of everything there. But no, I've really just focused in on the modelling so far.
Can you name a couple of the things that you've been in and what you've done?
I've worked on some pretty big films. I worked on the Fantastic Beasts films.
I love that film as well.
The second one, all of the scenes in Paris in the second film were not actually filmed in Paris. They built a backlot. They built a backlot at one of the London studios where they built just a couple of like fake Paris street sets, but only up to like the second floor of the buildings. So everything above that is a digital set extension, and then everything you see down the streets as well. Wow. So I built those digital extensions for some of the scenes, not every single scene in Paris, but the ones that my company was working on.
When you watch sort of that film back, what sort of buzz do you get when you see your scene in shot?
Yeah, it's a really good feeling. Sometimes it's really disappointing because they just grade everything so dark that you can't see any of it. And I spent like 3 months building something, and then it's just completely lost in shadow. But yeah, no. On the whole, when I can see my work on screen, especially when I've made some like creative decisions to like about the shape or the particular style of architecture or a little feature of a building that I know is all me and no one would have done it the same way.
I was definitely going to ask you on that, Merritt.
One of the most rewarding things.
How much creative license? Because obviously something in the Hollywood scene, they all want it a very particular way, perfect way, the structured way. I wondered when you get, obviously varies script to script and plan to plan, but do you find yourself getting more creative license or less?
It varies from project to project. I guess as I've become slightly more experienced and I get slightly bigger assets,
yes,
they tend to be a bit less planned out in advance, so there is a little bit more creative freedom. So things like this Paris street scene, the production designer had very specific blueprints for some of the buildings that he wanted in like key shots. But then for some of the others, they just said, make it up, make it look like Paris. So I was able to go away and do a bit of my own research, look at Parisian architecture and just use my own creative judgment as to what buildings.
This is probably the most I've ever smiled on a podcast all the way through. I'm just like, you are fascinating me in every way, and it is baffling. Have you worked on any projects where it was hard work, it became work?
I don't know. There's always a little bit there's some challenges on every project. Some projects are a breeze. A lot of the time, by clients, I mean like the film production companies who are giving the work to the VFX company I'm working at. The clients will change their brief halfway through, or they will, they'll add in some scenes, or we'll have been working on a scene for 6 months and then they cut it from the film. So that's the.
You still get paid.
I still get paid for the work I've done. I mean, I get paid a daily rate, regardless of what the work I'm doing is.
And just a couple more mentions of what you've done.
Other films, I worked on Paddington 2. So I built some of the prison environment for that. I built the hot air balloon that they use to escape from prison.
I know the scene. I've been watching all the kids' films at the minute with little baby there, and we had Paddington 2 on, so I'm going to go back and watch that, and Chris was a part of it. I'm so excited. But can you remember the first time you worked on with a big company, you got that email through, yeah, we want you, we love what you're about? Can you remember that moment?
I don't think that moment really existed. Like I mentioned earlier, I think I started off working as basically technical support as a data operator. After about 2 years in that position, it wasn't so much a case of an email saying, we love you. Yeah. It was more, we're really fucked. We need more modelers right now. Yeah. So we need all hands on deck. Can you come and help out in the modeling department for a few months? And then they got another film in straight away, and so I was able to move on to the next film, and that's how my modelling career started. It wasn't so much being in the right place at the right time, it was more being in the right place and having the patience to wait there for 2 years.
Fascinating, man. I mean, what I liked, we debriefed before the podcast, and an element that you did want to bring up was it isn't all sunshines and rainbows.
It's not, no. For a lot of the projects that I work on, or a lot of my contracts, it's all project based. So I'll get taken on for the duration of one film at a time, which could be anything from 5 weeks to maybe 4 or 5 months, typically.
Yeah.
And then I'm basically out of the job and I have to go and look for something else. So yeah, it can be challenging to sort of find work, especially in my early career. I mean, before COVID, a couple of years ago, I wasn't having too much difficulty finding a steady job. But certainly, like, rewind 6 6-7 years ago,
Okay.
I would be working for maybe 3 or 4 months of the year and then chasing work for other 8 months of the year, looking for something, sending out applications, and also spending a lot of my own free time just trying to work on my skills, trying to like learn new aspects of the like VFX techniques and that sort of thing, and then putting that into a show reel to send out to companies to say, hey, I can do this kind of work. But yeah, it takes even as a seasoned professional, it still takes a lot of dedication and investment of my own time to make sure that my skill set keeps up to date with what companies are looking for.
I mean, not to go into all the finances, but does it provide enough in that period of time to give you that breathing space to be able to do the learning and then looking for the next job?
It does now.
Yeah.
Now that I've been working for about 10 years in the industry.
My man. Cheers to that.
Cheers. When I started as, first of all, a data operator and then as a junior modeler, they were paying me pittance. I think I was on about 16,000 to start, which doesn't sound too bad until you consider the cost of renting in London at that time was at least 6,000 a year for renting not just a flat, but a single box room in a shared flat with a load of strangers.
Just you and your computer.
And then a couple of grand in tax, and then I'd have like, I don't know, 8,000 to cover all of my other living costs for food, travel, and occasionally a small luxury or a trip home. The train to get back up to Derby to visit my parents was ridiculously expensive. So yeah, I had to. Money was very tight at the start, but as my career has progressed, I am able to demand a slightly higher fee. So I can get by for a few months without too much difficulty.
That's amazing. And you're still always refining your techniques and building on your craft.
I keep trying. Well, whenever I don't have a job on a film, I'll try and be working on a personal project. So
cool.
I think we have a little bit of footage that we can put into the podcast for anyone
guys,
watching.
If
on
you're listening
YouTube.
to this, then stop listening. Go all the way over to YouTube because we're going to put a few of the videos.
Yeah, well, we'll bring them up now. So this is a shot.
Visuals.
This is a shot of a spaceship that I made. It's Slave One from Star Wars.
Okay.
A few years ago, I was able to photograph the original miniature when it was on display in London.
Wow.
So just using that as reference, I've been able to build my own digital model of it. I'm in the process of texturing it now. So like all of the red parts are finished. The textures are just about there. Maybe a little bit of tweaking. The green parts still need a lot more work.
I'm so excited to watch this podcast back and have these in the visuals.
But I felt the need to do that off my own back, really, to help me get more work in the future, just because I've not really been given that kind of big spaceship hero asset before in any of my previous jobs. So this is my way of saying to anyone that employs me in the future, I can do the really cool stuff, not just tiny little background buildings or whatever, but like full screen hero spaceships, because it's a lot more technical doing this sort of model with like curved surfaces and lots of intricate hull panel details. And like the mechanical like engine bay on the back is a little bit more technically challenging than some of the other models I've worked on in the past. So I just wanted to push myself forwards, but also show companies that I can do that kind of work. And so hopefully they'll give me spaceships on really cool films in the future.
ET2.
I was thinking more actual Star Wars. But hey, if ILM wanted to give me a job, I would be very interested.
ET floats my boat. I mean, with that one in particular, the one we've just shown up, that product, how long would that take, for example?
Difficult to say. I've actually been working on it on and off since I took the photos of the original miniature about 4 years ago, I think. Just like a few weeks here, a few weeks there.
Okay.
I'd say it's probably maybe about 6 weeks of like Monday to Friday, 9
Yes,
till
yeah.
6, it would be the equivalent of about 6 weeks of solid full-time work to get to that stage.
And with learning, it does help to have people to learn from and mentors. Do you have people that you can go to and say, how do you develop this technique? Or have you got your craft down to the knowledge base, it's just you refining certain parts of it now?
Yeah, certainly when I'm working in various different companies, there will be more senior, more experienced artists, so that if I come across a problem that I can't solve myself, then I can go to my supervisor or my lead artist and say, can I have a bit of help with this, or could you point me in the right direction? What do you think I should do here? But of course, as I've become more experienced, I'm sort of getting up to that senior sort of level myself. I have the experience to tackle most challenges myself.
Have you hit them as well on the way on a big film where there is a time frame on it? Have you hit the snags where you're running out of time and getting a bit anxious towards that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Actually, across the whole industry, there can be a lot of pressure put on artists to sort of to stay late in the offices if they need to hit a deadline. So you'll get paid for 8 hours from 9 till 6 with an hour's break for lunch. But then if your work still isn't finished, or if the company hasn't allocated enough time, they've given you a job that should take 5 days, but they want it done in 3.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Then you sometimes have to finish that work off your own back by staying late in the evening. So you can do like 2, 3, 4 hours of unpaid overtime.
Really?
It can be that bad. I mean, I've heard horror stories of some lighting artists at a particular company I won't name,
Of course, yeah.
being literally blocked from leaving the building even at like 10 or 11 at night by their supervisor because their shots weren't finished.
That's
they were
mesmerising.
forced to stay in the building.
Do the lighting.
It's a really kind of
Cutthroat.
slightly toxic culture. I guess for junior artists, like people just starting out who haven't had that sort of experience of working on big Hollywood films at the beginning of their career, they have a lot more enthusiasm and energy, and so they're just excited to be doing it, so they're happy to give their time for free.
Course.
And I definitely fell into that boat myself when I was starting out.
Would you say to young artists that could be listening to this potentially, don't get stuck in that trap if you can?
I don't really know if you'd have a choice, to be honest.
I get you.
I mean, certainly anyone in the industry is able to say, I'm only contracted for 8 hours work, so that's all I'm going to do today. And the company couldn't really fire you if you insisted on leaving at your contracted time at 6 p.m. But like I was saying earlier about the sort of uncertain nature of like contract to contract, if you were always insisting to leave on time every day when there was still more work to be done, you couldn't expect necessarily that the company would want to hire you again in the future.
Job,
so it's it is a bit of a vicious cycle. Artists will put in extra hours to try and make a good impression, but then that's sort of become the norm, the industry standard. So you often have to, and the companies will sort of allow for that willingness and budgeting in how long they allow for certain tasks. So it's almost built into the system now that you have to do that extra overtime.
We need you to open up your own company eventually, because you've seen these flaws and then you can actually help people.
Yeah, but then the problem with that is I couldn't compete with all of the other companies that are exploiting their workers.
Back to indie films. But the thing for me, I'm self-employed, so I go into school self-employed, I do filmmaking self-employed. I'm very much on a low level, but I love what I do. And it's sometimes when you're so stuck into a project, so happy to be there, time becomes obsolete, you want to be there anyway. I've done shoots where I was so happy with the shots, I didn't want to leave the screen, and I'd be there for 4 a.m. going, little gremlin Mikey there, and it feels good. But I suppose when you're on somebody else's time, you become quite conscious and aware of that, and when they're trapping you, you don't want to feel that, do you? So because you've done a lot of self-employed work for it as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, well, because of the sporadic nature of some of the contracts I've had, I've tried to find ways of getting by in between those longer breaks between visual effects jobs. So I actually turned sort of going back to my roots and the sort of amateur filmmaking I did as a child, as a school kid, I've tried to sort of start a sideline try and make a sort of side hustle, side career in sort of videography and photography.
Awesome.
I guess it was about 10 years ago I picked up a camera, a proper DSLR camera for the first time. That would have been a Canon 550D.
I know it.
Basic entry-level camera.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was doing all this stuff before at school, I knew nothing about photography. I just thought that if you pointed the camera at something interesting, that would make a good film. But no, so I guess as a young adult, around 20, 22 or something, I picked up my first camera. I got obsessed with just learning about the technical side of photography, like apertures, shutter speed, ISO, and the effect that all of those things have on the picture. And so I just, looking for interesting things to photograph, I asked a few of my friends in bands if I could take pictures for them. And yeah, it sort of led to a side career in music photography and directing music videos. So it's been...
And here you are.
Here I am. That's really how I met you, Mikey.
Mate, exactly.
Through mutual friends in the music scene just around here in Derby.
Matey. I mean, I'd just go into that, all the technical sides of things. If there's any young filmmakers listening to this, they might be quite interested in that part. Did you learn on the job, or did you go and do the background work of learning about ISO, learning about aperture and so on? Or did you take loads of really rubbish, crappy stuff, shitty stuff, and then go, why is it like that? Oh, because of the aperture, because of the ISO.
I went through that crappy, shitty stuff shooting phase when I was in school with the old camera. But when I came round to sort of trying to learn photography properly, I spent, before I pointed the camera at a real living human, I spent a lot of time reading. At the time, it was mostly like physical magazines was the best source of learning. There's just so many online blogs and free resources on the internet.
I wish I was more like you.
To learn that sort of thing.
I just my process has all been trial and error completely. Going getting band in your shots and then going, oh, now I've got to get the shutter speed right to match the lighting and so on. You go, oh no, more knowledge and more ruined clips. And it would really help if people, artists, young aspiring filmmakers did a little bit of that background before they get involved. Sometimes.
To a certain extent, I'd say absolutely go out and shoot as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then if you come across a problem or something doesn't look the way you want it to, then absolutely go and research it.
Yeah.
Don't just hope that it'll fix itself on its own.
There's a lot of heartache with that.
Yeah. Just you need to understand the technical side of it, but don't let that stop you from
Great advice.
From being creative and just getting out and doing it. I mean, I think on-the-job experience is, in a lot of cases, the best way to learn. And if something doesn't work on one film shoot, then you can learn from it and do it better the next time. Because
of the heartache of losing footage or just completely ruin it. If you've got too much grain in a shot or anything like that, it's gone.
Yeah.
And you learn very quickly when you don't want that to happen again. Especially when you're working with good artists that deserve, they've paid for your time, they've paid for your attention, they've paid for everything. They deserve the quality, so you want to provide that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've made loads of friends in this scene then, by being self-employed and... Yeah,
I think I've done photo shoots or music videos for over 100 bands or artists.
So cool.
Over about a 6-year period.
Wow.
I've worked my ass off in this industry, probably in like music videography and photography, more than in VFX,
Yeah.
possibly. The downside of that is splitting my time between those two separate career paths. I feel like the time I've put into each one of them has held the other one back. So all the time I spent photographing bands was time that I wasn't spending learning new visual effects techniques, and vice versa. When I put my photography work on hold for a few months to go and work on a film, I was losing contacts, missing out on jobs in the photography side. So I feel I could have progressed in either one of those careers faster if I hadn't been doing both at the same time.
Do you have a preference?
I don't think I could pick one, really.
Really?
I mean, in terms of, I think now I've got to the point where I can depend on visual effects work a little bit more, and it certainly pays a lot better. That's what I've really been focusing on the last 3 or 4 years.
Do you have more gratitude in either? Because for me, with CGI, seeing that at the end, something that wasn't before and you've imagined into being, gives me a come up. I get this big burning, wow, that must be such a powerful feeling. But yeah, I suppose seeing my work on the big screen sometimes for a lot of the films I've worked on is probably a bit more rewarding than seeing a band photo I took on Facebook get 10 likes or something. So yeah, I suppose I'd say the VFX work ultimately has become more rewarding, but the thing I value most from the band work that I've been doing is certainly not the pay. That was always terrible. No, never the pay.
But the people that I met doing it, like all of my best friends, my closest friends today, are people that I met through that scene.
Was Herbie Rowley one of those?
He was, yeah.
Was he?
I saw his podcast you did with him.
Big shout out.
Yeah, he was.
He's coming back on soon.
Is he? All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I look forward to it. But yeah, he's such a dude.
Oh, mate. Again, like you say, it emanates, doesn't it? Because you meet one of those people, and then you start to build the tribe up.
Yeah.
And what you can tell you've got a great friendship, and the way you work together. Because obviously we do the busking sessions, and I've seen that chemistry. There's like a no between each other. Oh, Chris is over there, Herb is there. It's just it just works.
Yeah,
is how
absolutely.
I'd put it.
I think we both have enough experience with videography. We're both editors as well, because we edit our own projects, so we can sort of see how the shots are going to fit together. And if I'm filming one thing, I see Herbie filming the same thing but from a different angle.
Yeah,
I'll change my view so that he's got something else different to cut to.
It's like poetry in motion watching you two together.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
As well as watching the bands, because I enjoy film so much, and it is only on an amateur basis I do it, but I've got that little bit of understanding of what you're doing as well, so I'm really enjoying, on a professional level, see it unfold. It's really cool. I mean, with all this, it gives you the ability to go away and travel with the self-employment, and especially having a camera. You know, that helps. You can go and document everything. You've been everywhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I was saying earlier, with the career uncertainty, the gaps between contracts, it isn't great. But the one saving grace of that is I can take a, I don't know, 3, 4, 5
sabbatical
month break from work. So yeah, a couple of years ago, I took 5 months off from looking for any kind of work to go traveling in South America for 5 months. Last year I took my camper van around Europe for 2 months. I complain about the uncertainty of the work in the industry, but if I did have a regular, like, steady desk job,
no perks,
accountant or something, and I got 4 weeks paid leave a year, I wouldn't be able to do this kind of
completely.
trip. So I guess it's ups and downs. Obviously, I'd prefer something a little bit more stable in terms of work, but the travel opportunities that I have from being able to take long breaks.
And when you're
really
there,
nice.
you're still getting to work on your craft and still getting to do that learning, I'm guessing, or did you choose not to at all?
I didn't take a computer with me to
Really?
South America. It was nice to just completely
Wow.
switch off and not touch a computer for literally 5 months.
But a camera, though, hopefully.
I had my camera.
I was going to say.
I had to buy a new camera, actually. My main camera, a Canon 5D, it was just too big and heavy. It weighs about 2 kilograms with the lens. So living out of a backpack for 5 months, I didn't want that extra weight.
What did you go to buy? What did you get?
I just got, kind of going back to the very first SLR that I had, I got, I don't know, I bought it while I was living in Canada, actually, because I haven't mentioned yet, but I spent 2.5 years living in Canada through my career. Through the visual effects work, I got sponsored by a company over there. But anyway.
2.5 years?
2.5 years in Canada.
And you were living there and working 9 to 5 in?
Yeah, it was a regular office job. Yeah, it was a great experience. I loved living away from the United Kingdom and experiencing another country.
You rented out a flat? Were you?
Yeah, I hired a flat. I was paying the same in Canadian dollars per month for my own flat as I was paying in pounds, about £600 a month or $600 a month I was paying the same as I was for a box room in London. I got a whole apartment to myself in Montreal.
Dude. That's special. And when you talk about stability, is that vision kind of, you're still traveling, you're still getting to see a new culture and be around, but you have got a bit more structure there. Is that what you enjoy?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I went to Canada, it was Montreal. The contract was initially for a year. And then at the end of the year, the company extended it for another year then another 6 months. I was sort of expecting they would extend it again, but then they just had a slight lull in the amount of work they had, and they weren't in a position to keep me on again. So that was quite uncertain. I had about a month's notice that they weren't going to be able to keep me on, so I had a month to either decide to come back home or go on a big adventure. So I took... Yeah,
and that's where it came from.
So yeah, a month's notice, I just hopped on a plane down to Trinidad.
That's why I wanted you on, is I knew about the CGI thing, but not to the core we've just gone into, and that is brilliant. But the pictures I'd seen, the stuff I knew about you was all travelling. And in my heart, I was going, I'd love to talk to Chris about his experience and his travelling and where he's been. And to combine the two together, I feel like I've got a good picture of who you are and what you're about now. So, yeah, where from Canada you landed to?
I went to Trinidad and Tobago, which is...
obvious choice.
Yeah, it's a small island nation in the Caribbean. It's just off the coast of Venezuela. I didn't really have... The only reason I chose there was because it was the cheapest flight I could get from Montreal. I think it was about £150 or something, but to get onto mainland South America was going to be like 500 or something, booking at such short notice. So I spent a week there. I didn't have too many options for flying on from Trinidad into the rest of South America. The only options were Guyana or Suriname were the only places with direct flights. So I just thought, fuck it, I wonder what's in Guyana. So I just hopped on a plane there.
This is great. What is in there? What is in Guyana?
Guyana was... I only spent about 3 days there, actually, before getting a minibus into the neighbouring country, Suriname. Guyana has lots of rainforest, lots of plantations. I mostly just saw the capital, which is Georgetown. Apparently a very dangerous place. I was told even the locals don't go out at night. But I had a nice day in the capital, walking around, seeing the sights. The markets there were just amazing. So many vibrant colours. It's a former British colony, actually, so English is the first, the official language there. The only place in South America that they speak English.
That's fascinating. It's got a big capacity. How many? Quite a small place?
It's... Yeah, very small.
Right.
Not a lot of tourists.
Wasn't my first place of thinking to go.
Like I say, the only reason I chose to go there was cheap flights coming down.
And what were you staying in hostels mainly?
Yeah, it was a hostel there in the neighbouring country Suriname. I had a small hotel room because that was quite cheap.
Right, but still, you were quite safe in that environment. You had your little base to go to.
Yeah.
Okay. And you did take that advice of not going out and about.
Well, I like my sunsets. So on my first day in Georgetown, I had a lovely afternoon walking around the market, found myself on the beach at sunset, and then had a beer, watched the sun go down, and then I thought, oh, I fucked it now. I had to leg it. It was about half an hour's walk back to the hostel.
Beat in the dark.
So I had to just try to leg it as quickly as possible and try and stick to like the more busier, more major roads. But yeah, it was pitch black by the time I got back.
It is good advice sometimes. You know, when you go travelling, listen to what people tell you and say.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of places have a really bad reputation for being quite violent, but if you just take local advice when you're there, avoid certain areas or certain times of day.
100%. Be wise with it. Because I didn't a lot of time, especially in Joburg and so on.
Yeah.
And that's my first experience of a dead body, actually. I've told this story a lot, but I won't go all into it. But because I live in Pretoria for like 8 months, I thought, I know South Africa, I'm cool. I went to Joburg for a day and everyone was just going, I know you think you know South Africa, but you don't. Don't go on, because there's like the white buses. Have you seen in South Africa? They have sort of like these white minibuses everywhere.
Okay.
And I just, again, it was all for money. I just wanted to save some money. And I thought instead of getting a taxi and doing all the right thing, I could just get on a bus and I know how to get to the hostel. The hostel was called Brown Crystals, which used to be run by the mafia.
Okay.
So I knew I was being daft, but I thought I could do it. Anyway, I got on there and straight away, I knew it was the wrong choice from the very off. And the guy came and sat next to me and went, "You're in a lot of danger. When we get off, follow me and I will literally look after you." And he gave me 50 rand and I trusted him. But straight away, and I had my partner at the time with me who was quite beautiful, blonde, very stereotypical. And we were just going through and everyone was sort of swarming us. And eventually we got to the taxi rank and they had a fist fight, all the taxi guys, over who got to take us.
Wow.
It was so intense, dude. So my advice ever since then was I'm going to listen a little bit more to what people say.
Yeah.
And it's helped greatly. But had you done that before where, I could just save a little bit of money over here? Or,
Yeah.
And gone against what they said?
I've had a couple of scary moments besides just walking through Georgetown. So I stayed in a town called Huaraz in Peru. It wasn't really that I was advised against staying in a particular part of the town, but it was more I just went for the cheapest accommodation.
There you go.
The cheapest hostel in a slightly dodgy area. I was walking back to the hostel one night, and then this dog starts barking across the street. You've heard the saying, all bark and no bite. Turns out that's not true.
Not true at all.
So
all bite.
Yeah, all bite. So this dog starts barking as I approach. I keep on the opposite side of the street trying to keep my distance from it and staring him down, like trying to assert my dominance, exactly. But when I get level with him, he just charges at me.
Straight away.
And then 3 of his friends just appear out of nowhere. 3 other dogs, they circle all around me there trying to bite me, and 2 of them actually succeed. I get a couple of massive bite marks in my leg. I tried to fight them off for... It all happened so fast, it must have just been a few seconds, but it became clear that like kicking them and hitting them with an empty glass bottle I had in my hand
Wasn't having it.
Wasn't working. They weren't being put off. So I thought at this point, well, if they get me on the ground, that's it. They can go for the jugular.
The jugular.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
So I just thought, fuck it, I've got to get out of here. I legged it down the street. They chased after me. They could have easily outrun me, but after about 50 meters or so, they just stopped and then went back to their bit of street. So I think they were just being territorial. But yeah, that's what happens when you try and save the pennies by...
You know what I mean? Saving them pennies. I had a phenomenally similar one in Koh Phangan, so an island off of Thailand.
Yeah.
And it was very touristy there, and it's where the full moon parties happen. But I did get too drunk, walked home one time, And it was this road where I knew these dogs were, because I never went up it because I saw these loose dogs and I thought, there's better ways of going. But this time when I was too drunk, I decided to go. And I remember I would have had the exact same situation, but I charged at them. I started screaming. I think I had something in my hand, but I ran full pelt, and I never would have done that if I was sober.
Yeah.
I would have done or like been backing off, but I made the scariest tribal noises, pegged it at them, and they did. They were like, "What is this nutter doing?" And they stayed away. I remember it really vividly. But the next day after, I sheepishly walked past and thought they're going to know me. they're going to think, there's that crazy guy. I've got all my mates with me now.
Yeah. Well, the scary thing about the dog attack was the next morning then I had to get out of the hostel, and then I saw some of the same dogs in the street the next morning.
Coming for blood.
I mean, I'd walked down the street loads of times in the daylight before, and there'd never been any problem. But I just thought, when I was walking to the bus stop with my big backpack on, this was after I'd already been out to the hospital to get a rabies injection, but then went back to the hostel to pick up my stuff and then go to the bus station to move on to the next town. I saw these same dogs and I was like, will they remember this is the guy that hit them with a glass bottle last night, or will they go for me again?
Come back for revenge.
Yeah. I did think about finding a knife or something and actually going after them. That was the kind of mentality I had. Like, they attacked me. And sort of almost, part of me wanted to get revenge.
One for one.
They were not safe to be in that street. Like, I don't know why the authorities hadn't like rounded them up or anything. They shouldn't have really been there.
Oh, 100%, man.
In an inhabited area.
There's going to be tourists as well.
Yeah, I mean, not so many tourists in this part of town, but
probably quite lawless. The police, the dogs, everything. Just a little bit of lawlessness. I'm enjoying this. Any other mad bits? Where else have you been?
I've been all over, but probably the other scary experience I had was in Mexico. It was the same year, actually. Before South America, I did a separate trip a few months earlier down to Mexico. I went to 3 different places in Mexico. I started off in Mexico City, which obviously has quite a bad reputation, but again, staying away from certain areas, it was absolutely fine. There were no problems there. I went up to Copper Canyon in the north.
Okay.
That's an area controlled by cartels, apparently, and there were a few people there came up to me and were like, "What are you doing here? It's not safe to be around here. There's like drug lords all over the place and loads of abductions." But there's the reason I went was there's a really scenic railway through Copper Canyon.
Oh, cool.
And it's like a 2-day train ride, and it was just amazing. And I didn't have any problems there either. But then when I got down to my third and final stop in Mexico, was down in Cancun, the super touristy part. That's where the problem started. And it wasn't gangsters or criminals, it was the police are the problem there. They look for any way they can to
which are kind of like
from,
gangsters.
I suppose so, fair point. They try and extort money from tourists in any way they can. So all over the area, I had a hire car for the 5 days I was there. They have like police checkpoints on a lot of the main roads going into cities, and they'll pull over random cars to do searches looking for drugs and things. Of course, they randomly always happen to be white tourists that they search. So they, I think on 4 separate occasions, on going into 4 towns, they randomly selected me for a search, trying to find drugs or anything. Obviously, I didn't have anything, but they were just looking for anything they could use as leverage to extract a bribe. The final time I was stopped by the police this is where it gets a bit crazy.
I've limped forward now.
I was just I was driving back to the airport and returning the hire car, and then on the freeway I get pulled over by the police driving along because apparently I was speeding. I don't think I was. I was going the same speed as all of the other...
You don't look like a speeder.
I was going the same speed as all of the other local cars.
Yeah.
But apparently I was doing about 80 kilometers an hour, which I thought was the limit. And they told me it was a 50 kilometer an hour limit in that section. So I had to pay a speeding fine. I had to pay in cash directly to them. and it wasn't a small fine. It was like £300 or £400. Of course, I didn't have that kind of cash on me. It was the end of my trip. I deliberately used up all of my pesos. So they helpfully offered to escort me to the nearest ATM.
Helpfully.
They told me to get back in my car, drive, and they would follow me. So I went down this slip road from the freeway. At the bottom, it was clear I didn't know where I was going, so they reluctantly sort of pulled in front of me, signaled that I should follow them. They went back up the opposite slip road, back onto the freeway. And at that point, I don't know what came over me, but I just pulled a hard left, went under the freeway, got back onto it in the opposite direction. I was only about a minute away from the car hire place that I was taking the car back to.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to them, that was the exit that I needed to take anyway. So if I wasn't speeding before that point, I certainly was then. I floored it for about a minute to get to the car hire place down a little side street off the freeway in the opposite direction.
Right.
About 30 seconds after I pull in there, I see the same police car with its lights flashing, speeding off. I assumed chasing after me, looking for me down the main freeway, past the end of the road, back to the main airport where most of the other car hire places were. So yeah, I was shitting myself.
You can
the whole
quite
time.
literally say to people, I had a police car chase in Mexico.
Yes, I can.
That's not normal, mate.
It's not.
That is not normal.
I don't know. It's moments like that make you feel alive.
Do you know when people do that, two lies and a truth? That definitely will stumble everybody forever. People that've not met you and you play that game, they will never get that. That'll always be their go-to lie. You definitely didn't do that. You did what? That's incredible, man. And just going through a couple, because we've gone through a couple of the negatives. Can you remember some of the most esoteric, beautiful experiences of traveling? Was it the people or the cultures or
a bit of everything. I just love everything about traveling, seeing how other people live their way of life, seeing like the most insane, crazy, beautiful, like natural landscapes. I think my favorite place in the whole of South America has to be Peru.
Okay.
It's the most touristy.
bar the dog bite?
Apart from getting attacked by dogs. But, it's the most touristy in the whole of South America, but for good reason. Just the attractions there. There's you can go trekking in the high Andes around amongst snow-capped peaks. There's rainforest. There's ancient historic towns. Lots of really fascinating culture, and of course the ancient monuments like Machu Picchu, which was amazing. You managed to go? I did. I did the 4-day trek to get there, which
was that the longest trek that you could do, or
there was an option that was I think the Ausangate trek is 10 days.
Wow.
And takes you over. If I'd like to do that if I ever go back.
Of course.
There. But the famous trek is called the Inca Trek, and that takes you along the Sacred Valley. It's not that difficult, but takes you past lots of old like Inca ruins that you can't get to any other way. So that's the main attraction, but that's always fully booked for at least sort of 6 months in advance. You book a ticket in advance. So there's another less popular route you can take, which is the Salcante trek. So that's the one I did. I would say that was probably better than the Inca trek.
Really?
Or the Inca Trail.
What made it so special?
The mountain scenery. Because the Inca Trail is basically along the valley where Machu Picchu is, but the Salcante trek takes you over a high mountain pass from the neighboring valley into the small canyon where the city is. And
what are you staying when you're trekking? Tents? Or?
It varied, actually. So as well as being one of the best experiences of the trip, it was also one of the best value, actually, this trek. I think I paid about £120 for the 4 days trekking, and then it was about another £40 for the Machu Picchu entry ticket, and then another £60 to get the train back afterwards. But yeah, £120 for 4 days trekking, including guides, including transport to the start, including all of the accommodation and food.
Such a misconception, isn't it, that you've got to have loads of money to be able to travel and see the world?
Absolutely, yeah. I think my daily budget was about £20 a day when I was in South America. I mean, over 5 months, that does add up
It
to
accumulates,
quite a lot.
but
I spent less than £1,000 a month while I was there.
I was saying to you before, I did Thailand, and there was days where £10, you were thought you were being frivolous.
Yeah,
you spent a tenner today.
Yeah.
Because my routine was literally, I lived on a hut in a beach, which is kind of very stereotypical but beautiful, and I knew there was a caller came out for morning for breakfast who had watermelon, just big bags of watermelon. So I'd go and pay him, I'd probably give him £1, and he thought, oh, what a guy, I was his best customer. I'd have that, and I'd kind of fast through the day. I wouldn't eat much after that because it was humid and hot. I didn't feel the need to eat, and then I'd just go out at maybe 6, 7 o'clock and have a meal later on in the market. And again, it's another £3-4. So £5 really a day is all I needed.
I think
Crazy.
South America's a little bit more expensive than that, but I was typically spending not more than £5 a night on accommodation and about £5 a day on food, and then variably £5 to £15 a day on activities or onward transport to the next stop.
So there's something very beautiful, isn't there, when you go to a country where they don't value money massively, but all possessions or materials. You see something more in their culture is about the family and time together and all these wholesome things. But some of the countries I stayed in, like South Africa, I took my Xbox with me, and at the end of it, I just give it to one of the guys that I was living with, the keeper, and he was doing all the maintenance and stuff. And he was just cuddling me, crying, hugging me. It's just my Xbox, like a 360. And I couldn't believe how much that meant to him. So it does show you your privilege, you know, what we have, our materials. And some degree, I think it's a privilege, but some degree, I feel it's a hindrance, do you know, because I'm trapped in that cycle then of materials and stuff.
I can definitely agree.
And
with that.
I don't feel as passionately and as strongly as he felt in that moment of receiving something. Do you know what I mean? That's what travelling showcased to me when I went away. It made me have a deeper appreciation for stuff back home. Did you come home with a similar feeling?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you do miss all of the comforts from home when you're travelling, especially living out of a backpack, sleeping in hostels, in rooms that you're sharing with 8 other guys who are snoring.
Oh, God, don't get me started.
You have a greater appreciation for the possessions you do have and just the comfortable life at home. The other thing I think I took away from South America was just a much greater sense of, greater ability, stronger patience. Traveling a lot overland. So the last flight I took in South America was from Suriname down to Belém at the mouth of the Amazon in Brazil. And from there, I traveled for the next 3 or 4 months completely overland or by boat. So I'd often be sat on a bus for like 12 hours straight, and you just have to learn to be patient, and nothing happens instantly. I think all of the locals are a lot more patient as well. They don't have the same like rigid timetables of buses for transport locally there, so it's just a case of they'll wait at a bus stop and not knowing when the buses are going to turn up, and they're just waiting,
just present.
They just have to be patient and wait until it comes. And then I'd spend 12 hours sat on a bus and just have to amuse myself with my own thoughts for that time. From Belém in Brazil, I sailed 4,500 kilometers up the Amazon to Colombia and Peru. But that took about 2 weeks. I think I spent about 12 days on boats.
Go on then, come on, man. Take me down that path. What happened? That sounds incredible.
It sounds incredible. And it was for about the first morning. There's no single boat that will take you the whole way there. It's all like divided up into different stages. So the first stage was a 5-day boat from Belém at the mouth of the Amazon to Manaus, which is like the capital of Amazonas in the center of northern Brazil. That was 5 days on a slow boat. the sailing up the Amazon, so you're surrounded by like rainforest either side of the water. At that part of the river, it's like 2 or 3 miles wide, so you generally sail close to one bank where you can see all of the trees and little houses and things on stilts perched along the riverbank, and it's just fascinating.
Much wildlife? Were you seeing?
A little bit. We not much in terms of like terrestrial, like ground wildlife.
Yeah.
You don't really see any birds, but we did see river dolphins actually. A few
Oh
points
wow, that's cool.
along the journey. Yeah, it was amazing. But then seeing basically the same view moving past you in slow motion day after day after day, you really have to be patient. It did sort of feel more like an endurance test at times. Would I change it? No, absolutely not. The memories from that are amazing. The sense of achievement getting off the final boat, like 4 boats later, after 12 days, and just saying, I've sailed the length of the Amazon.
Yeah.
And then being so glad to get back on solid ground. And
again, you've come away with wisdom from it. Same thing. Me and Chrissy went to New Zealand and we got a hire car, went to Hobbiton. Incredible time of my life. Come back, this was on the North Island, went to the south with my mate Jagger, who'd lived out there for a year, and we just wanted to fit it all in maybe, I think we were there 3 to 4 weeks, not enough time to do it all, so we just absolutely blasted through it. And really it was just loads of beautiful greenery, but I kind of wished I'd have pinpointed places and stuck to a bit of a path of we're going to do this and do this here. Had a bit of structure towards it, because when we did just drive, some days we're driving for 9 hours.
Yeah.
And I know what that feels like. It's not necessarily what I want to take on my travels with me. It was just to say we'd been and done the South Island, but I don't think we'd done it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To its core. I'd just seen it.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to just slow down and take the time to sort of experience the moment. It's not always about the final destination, but about the journey, or some philosophical bullshit like that.
And sometimes I completely agree. I had that in actuality. Ayers Rock's really cool, and maybe you'll go in when you're to Australia. Oh
yeah, we've not actually mentioned that yet.
Well, should we do it now?
Yeah, let's
Should
go.
we do the big reveal? I'm so sorry. I was trying to hide this moment, but no, it is a big reveal. I'm going to give you a high five now, mate.
Right.
It's a massive success.
Yeah.
What's happened to you?
So, I was talking earlier about the uncertainty of the career. About 2 weeks ago, completely out of the blue, I got an email from a company in Australia that I sent them an application a year and a half ago before COVID, and then Australia closed their borders and the application was just put on hold then. Out of the blue 2 weeks ago, I get an email asking if I'm still interested in the job. So yeah, I had an interview, they made me an offer, I've accepted, and so yeah, with about two weeks notice, I'm starting to make plans to move out to Australia for it will be the best part of a year.
Dude, I mean, to have that as a possibility in your life where you can go, do I want this job? Go out in Australia, do a year away, start living a completely new life is, it's not luck, because you've created it for yourself. You've made these moments happen. You've created the reality you wanted to live, which is incredible. But I feel for you. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm a little bit conflicted about the job. It's come so suddenly. I'd already been making plans that as like Europe unlocks from COVID again, I was hoping to take my camper van back to Europe and see some other parts. I'd already been like planning out routes and things, other countries I wanted to visit up here. But now that I have this opportunity, on balance, I think I'll get more out of Australia.
Yeah, and you've never done it before, Australia?
I have been once, like on a family holiday as a teenager, but it'll be my first time, like when I'm old enough to actually enjoy it or remember it.
Yes. I was talking about Ayers Rock and that experience travelling. I was so excited on the ocean road and going to these destinations, but when I get there, it was good and I loved it, but I realised very quickly on the way were the really special bits, because I remember we stopped off in the outback somewhere, but I was with all my friends. We had a big convoy of cars, so we're all following one another, and it was really beautiful. Stopped off, had a barbecue, all in a fire, and this night, one time a koala bear, just really Australian-like, came into the middle of the group and just stood and looked at us, and we were like, oh my God. And then we saw it had a little baby with it and everything, and it was just so stunning. Later on that night, what is it, a kangaroo, a herd of kangaroo, it can't be a herd, I don't know what collective kangaroos are either. I don't. But just a bunch of kangaroos started bouncing about, and I thought, this is so special. And then getting to the destinations that we thought, oh, this is going to be the big moment, it didn't actually live up to what I'd just been through. Do you know what I mean? So I thought that was quite powerful, what you said. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the process. But Australia, man.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. I've just been drowning in a sea of paperwork for the bureaucracy of getting the visa for the last week.
Of course.
But I think that's mostly sorted now. So I'll be waiting about 3 or 4 weeks for the visa to be processed. Then it'll be probably by the time this podcast
Bombs away,
comes out,
mate.
I'll be just about heading off.
And where are you going to base yourself?
It'll be in Adelaide.
Right, I didn't get to go to Adelaide actually. So, in terms of the island, which bit is Adelaide?
It's on the south coast. It's pretty
South
much
coast.
dead centre.
Oh, so
in the
near
south.
Melbourne then?
Yeah, just a little bit around from Melbourne.
Yeah, Melbourne is my hometown. It's where later down the line, 28 now, let's double my age. That's where I want to be.
Okay.
Down the line.
Nice.
I've wrote that here. That's a contract. But
yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll still be there by then.
Dude,
I mean, the contract's for a year to begin with. I have no idea what's going to happen to me the year after. I might get offered an extension. They'll keep me around a bit longer.
You know what the job is and everything, though?
I don't know what films I'm going to be working on. The company is called Rising Sun Pictures. They're
Trying
not
to picture what
very
sort of films. It's not going to be horror.
They do all sorts.
Really?
They do whatever work they can get from film companies, but looking like on their website at past films they've worked on, they've done a lot of Marvel films.
Right.
They've done some of the same films I've been involved with, like Gravity.
Oh, cool.
An Amazon Prime film called The Aeronauts.
Right.
A few others that I've worked on as well. But yeah, lots of Marvel stuff. They did that Peter Rabbit thing with that man I want to punch.
Who's he?
James Corden.
Oh no, poor old James.
But yeah, they've done loads of cool stuff.
Yeah. And did you see a job offer emerge, sign up for it, get this, or did you know that company was somebody you wanted to work with?
Well, it was, I guess. So a year and a half ago, I'd just come back from South America and I was just sending out applications everywhere. I'd been aware of this company before because of the involvement that I'd had in some of the other films they'd worked on. There was actually a lot of sharing of assets. So sometimes one VFX company will build an asset, but it'll be needed in other shots. So I know that working at Cinesite in London, I think it was at the time, we were getting a load of Rising Sun Pictures assets sent to us. So that's how I came to know of the company.
Right.
That was for Gods of Egypt, I think, which was a terrible film.
Really?
I wouldn't recommend watching it. But yeah, that was a film I worked on that this company has also
What did you have
on.
to do for that, just out of interest?
So the main thing we did, there's a battle scene about halfway through with like a stone stronghold thing.
Okay.
With like lots of cliffs and waterfalls around
Sure.
it. So I was building parts of that environment.
So exciting to make.
Yeah, it was actually one of the most enjoyable jobs I've had.
But then you had to go
the
back
film
and
was
watch
terrible,
it.
but that was a good example of a film where I had a little bit of autonomy to sort of
Sure.
shape how things were going to be arranged. So I sort of designed the arrangement of the waterfalls in the background to make them fit nicely around the castle that was built into the cliffs.
Mate, I'm looking over at you with... I've not known you for a long time, but I'm so proud of who you are and what you're achieving and what you're doing. It's really inspiring to see.
Thank you.
I value it so much. I mean, I've got to play dad today. I've got little Ella to push around. Chrissy's got to go and do some stuff. But where can people hear more about you, find out what you're up to, and just what is next for the journey? It is Australia.
Yeah, Australia
Sorted,
for the
mate.
next year or so, and then I have no idea what next. Maybe longer in Australia, maybe working somewhere else, maybe back home in England. Whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be amazing.
Because we could have gone everywhere on this podcast, and I want to redo this with you, refine, but it's going to be a year.
Yeah, next time when I'm back from Australia, even if I'm staying longer than a year, I'm sure I'll be back next summer. We'll do it again, and I'll let you know.
I'm going to miss you, dude. I'm going to miss you. The busking sessions are going to miss you. Everyone around's going to miss you, mate. But absolute congratulations to you. Give you one of these.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. So, and people to like keep up with you, because you do put some photos up. Do you want them to?
Absolutely.
Keep up and see? Okay, where can they find you?
Instagram is the best place to check out what I'm doing. For my travel stuff and personal stuff, it is at Chris Clough Photo.
Awesome.
If you want to see some of my 3D work, I've got a separate Instagram account for that, which is chrisclough.3D.
Brilliant. I hope there's big organisations watching this, mate.
Cheers.
Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Remember what we say, this is the last thing, this is all I care about. Be nice to one another, you beautiful buggers. That's what counts. Thank you. Cheers for being here, mate.
Cheers.